If your church is not growing in generosity, the first answer is probably not that you need to talk about it more. That is what a lot of churches assume, right? We keep talking about giving, but people aren't moving. So, what do we need to do? Well, we need to say it more often. We need to say it more strongly, more passionately. We need to build better giving campaigns. And I mean, listen, sometimes there are situations where a church really has under communicated on generosity, but I mean, that happens, but it's not usually the core issue here. The issue is that the communication is too broad to create movement. The issue isn't that we're not saying it enough. The issue is that we're saying it so broadly that everyone is hearing the same thing. Therefore, no individual is hearing what they need to hear. This is what I want to talk about in this episode because this shows up all the time. By the way, not just around generosity, but around volunteering, serving, group participation, discipleship steps of any kind, even inspiring and equipping people to sit down and spend time in devotion, with their Heavenly Father. But let's focus this conversation on giving. Okay, leaders feel, and you probably do. I know I used to. We feel that we are saying the right things, and we're not saying it randomly. We think about it when we talk about generosity, whether it's in a welcome segment, in a vision moment, even in a sermon, dismissal through an email. I mean, we're not just vamping, right? We have thought about what we want to say. And so, in most cases, right, we are saying the right things. I mean, technically, our verbiage is right. The problem is that the message keeps landing at the level of the room instead of the level of the individual person. And that is where traction really begins to stall. A lot of churches live in room level communication. Let me kind of unpack that. That may not be a term we're all familiar with, room level communication. Room level communication is saying it to the entire room, whether there's 50 people in that room or 5,000 people in the room, but the same message saying, the thing, saying it once and saying it to everybody, and then hoping that people respond. And to be fair, right, room level communication feels efficient. It certainly saves time. It keeps the message simple. Everybody hears it, right? Or at least everybody who attended hears it. But spiritually formative communication, it doesn't really work well that way. Because, right, different people need different emphasis. Different people are in different places in their faith journey. I mean, here's some categories we talk about, but a seeker does not need the same language that a steward needs. A student doesn't need the same invitation that a shaper needs. If those are new terms for you, just go back a few episodes on the podcast on this YouTube channel, or you can just go to my website. It is all over the place there. Okay, those categories we talk about the 5 rights, starting with the right person. Those 5 categories are the right people. So when you flatten all of those into one broad appeal for the whole room, right? Room communication, room level communication, the message, it may sound fine, but it often does not move anyone in particular. And that's why generosity is really such a revealing category. It exposes how imprecise church communication can become. Like a pastor says, we want everyone to take a step in generosity, which is true. It sounds right. And it sounds spiritual, sounds inclusive. It sounds like something probably nobody in the church would disagree with. But it is still, it's so broad. It's too broad to move most people in the room because a step is not the same for everyone. And we intuitively already know that, right? For one person, a generosity conversation may need to begin with just trust. For someone else, it may need to begin with formation. For another person in the room, it may need to center on ownership and setting an example for younger believers or even non believers. Same topic, right? Generosity, but different people, different messaging. This is not, by the way, about becoming like more market driven, okay? This is about becoming more intentional as a shepherd. You know how like we read about biblically, right? The sheep know the shepherd and the shepherd knows their sheep by name. That is basically saying that sheep can't be treated the same, right? They are all at different places in their, quote unquote, following of the shepherd. And this is where I think a lot of pastors and teens really get tired, right? You're working hard, and teams are communicating constantly, consistently. They're bringing the issue up, which is really positive to do. But the language around giving that they're offering is just, and this is in services and emails and follow-ups. But there isn't any movement, right? Movement isn't really happening, at least on the level that we think it should be. So, as I said earlier, the assumption becomes we need more volume, but usually what we need is more precision, right? We don't need to say it more. We need to say it more clearly, more precisely, and that makes a huge, huge difference. A lot of leaders, right, confuse coverage with clarity. They think if the whole room heard it, then the church communicated well, but not necessarily. People do not move just because something was said publicly. People move when they can recognize that this is for them, that this matters now for them. And I know what to do next, right? I know what to do, not the whole room. This is a really much higher level of clarity than most church communication ever reaches. And when the message doesn't get there, what it actually does is create low grade frustration across the room. The people who are ready to, who are ready to maybe give here don't feel seen. The people who are new do not know how to respond. The people who are engaged hear language that feels too basic. The people that are hesitant hear language that feels too advanced. Same message, though. Different emotions, different feelings across the room. So everybody gets included, yeah, but nobody gets really moved. That's the trap. And then what happens next, I think, is even more important. The problem starts getting mislabeled. Leaders start calling it apathy or resistance or lack of generosity or low buy-in. And you know what we do? We blame the people. And sometimes those things are valid for at least some of the people. But a lot of the time, what is being diagnosed as resistance is really just a clarity problem. It's a segmentation problem, a precision problem. The message was just too general. The next step was just too abstract. The person was never clearly identified. So here is where I would encourage you to slow down this week. Before you ask, how can we make the next giving message stronger, whether it's a vision moment or sermon or whatever it may be, and not in theory, in reality, ask this, right? Who are we actually trying to move? In a giving conversation, we would think maybe in segmentations like, are we trying to move non-givers? Are we trying to move people who are just emotionally tipping? Are we trying to move an unplanned giver to their next best step? And then ask, what is true about this person, this category right now? Why are they non-givers? Why are they just tipping? Why do they give sporadically, occasionally, but they don't have a plan? Why do they not think percentage? Whatever the category is, what about the person, that category, is true right now? Then ask, what resistance are they feeling? What confusion are they carrying? What kind of language would make this feel clear instead of feel generic? And what is the one next step that fits their specific stage? That is precision questions. And that is where better communication starts because it's targeted. It's targeted. And it's also where better discipleship design starts because we do not exist, right, to grow giving as an isolated metric. We exist to grow disciples. And generosity is important, but it is just one expression of discipleship. Serving is an expression. Group engagement and community is an expression of discipleship. Personal time with God is another. So all of these things matter because formation matters, which means our communication cannot just be loud enough to be heard. It has to be clear enough to guide. That's the shift. So here's a just highly practical action step that I would put in front of you maybe for this week. Take one message in your church that your church is about to communicate. It could be a generosity moment, or if you want to think about a different, discipleship area, it could be a volunteer invitation. It could be a groups or community push, and any kind of next step announcement. But before you give the announcement, right, ask your team to stop writing for the room. Ask yourself to stop writing for the room, and instead pick one person in one stage, pick one resistance point and one clear next step. Then write the message around that clarity, around that reality, not around the crowd, around the person. That one exercise will tell you so much about why some of your communication keeps sounding right without producing that much traction. Because when the person becomes clear, right, the message gets so much sharper and movement gets stronger. When the message gets sharper, the next step stops feeling abstract. And that really is where traction is found. It's where movement begins. It's not with more noise, it's just with more clarity. And if this is a pressure point in your church right now, don't settle for asking whether you have talked about it enough, right? Ask whether you have designed the message clearly enough for the people you are actually trying to move. That question will help you lead with a lot more intention.